Tonight on the DTD podcast, we've got an author that spent 2 tours to Afghanistan. He's a sergeant first class in the Army now. He's here to talk about all of his experiences over there and how they've affected him back here. Tobias Ambriz is going to be on the show tonight, so let's get into it.
Are you not entertained? Are you not entertained? Is this not why you are here?
How about no, you crazy Dutch bastard? What we've got here is failure to communicate.
60% of the time, it works every time.
That doesn't make sense.
Everyone in this room is now dumber for having listened to it. I award you no points, and may God have mercy on your soul.
That's cute. I remember when I had my first beer.
Why so serious?
I am serious, and don't call me Shirley.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the DTD podcast. We have a special show tonight. This guy has done and seen some things that the normal person hasn't. It's affected him over there, it's affected him back here, but he's decided to put that together to help out other veterans and other people who might be going through some trouble. So let's welcome to the show. Sean, how are you, man?
I'm good. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, man, I'm so excited. We've had some hiccups trying to get this recorded and everything, but I'm glad that we're finally back into it. So let's real quickly go over your career. You enlisted in 2008. You have been to Fort Carson, Schofield Barracks, Joint Base Lewis McChord, Fort Leonard Wood. You've been a medic for your unit. You've been I guess you would say sharpshooter or a sniper for your unit. You've been on a special reaction team. You've done 2 tours to Afghanistan. You got 2 Bronze Stars with V for Valor. You've got a Purple Heart. Man, you've kind of been there and done that. And why don't you hit us off right off the bat with just how old you are to have seen all that stuff?
All that stuff happened pretty close to the first half of my career. It's been pretty boring. I won't say boring, but that was all the first 5-6 years. I'm 32 now. Just turned 32 this past October. So yeah, I'm getting up there.
Yeah, I was talking to someone the other day, and I was saying when I was in the military, you see these guys that are like sergeant majors, and when you're, a private or a specialist, you think, man, those guys are so old and they're so wise. And then now I look back and I'm 44 and I say, man, that guy was like 37 years old, 38 years old. Like he was a baby.
I know, right?
And being in charge of that. So let's talk about your book, Ghosts of the Valley. You wrote it, and it's a very personal introspection. Now, what I really like about it was you don't concentrate on your entire tours that you spent over there. You focus on, I would say, 2 main battles, but 3 or 4 main things that happened over there during your first tour, during your second tour. Why'd you decide to write this book?
So I didn't set out to write the book. I did a podcast the other night, and somebody asked a good question of, how it's kind of helping veterans now, and was that the theme of your message the entire time? And I could honestly say that no. Initially, it was a very selfish thing of me. Is I had gotten here to Fort Leonard Wood last August, and by November, I was noticing my PTSD was changing for the first time, because I was always in line units with soldiers, going to the field, NTC cycles, stuff like that. So I was always kept busy ever since my deployments, and late night phone calls or soldier problems, stuff like that. So I was always on the run, and my PTSD was always suppressed because of all the workload I was taking on. Now that I'm here as an instructor, like I said, last August when I got here, it wasn't until November that I was like going out of my mind. I was going crazy. My PTSD for the first time I was noticing was evolving, and it was evolving to my situation. And I didn't have late night phone calls. I was getting off at 2-3 o'clock every day, and I was by myself in the middle of Missouri and nowhere. And my head started to talk a lot. And so somebody had mentioned to me, you should just therapeutically write. And so I didn't set out to write a book. I just opened the Microsoft Word and I just started pounding away, put my feelings on paper, talking about what happened. And I just kind of put, like I said, I didn't talk about the deployment as a whole. It was just main events that I think about, daily. And I had somebody look over it, and they're like, "Dude, you should turn this into a book." And kind of took it as more of like a compliment, and I was like, "Nah." And then more people read it, and they were like, "Yeah, do it." So then I figured, well, if I have something that good, maybe I can use it for the better to help others. And then it kind of formed into what it was now.
And it seems like when you talk about it, like I said, it's a very much of an introspection on yourself, looking at how you felt, and you talk about your feelings a lot in it, which is it's not strange at all, but it's not a normal thing that you will see a lot of soldiers or people that are in front lines talk about his feelings. They'll talk about more of the objective of what was supposed to happen, battle plans, all that kind of stuff. You don't really see them talk about your feelings, but over and over in the book, you talk about your feelings. So let's get into your first deployment right now. You're young. You are excited to go over there. From everything that I understand from reading the book, you're excited to go over there. You're nervous, but you're excited to kind of see, because that's why you joined the army, was to fight for your country. So you touch down in Afghanistan. Thoughts that are going through your head as you get there.
I think it was hard to gather fear. I think for all of us that deployed our first time, it was hard for us to really have fear because you didn't know what to be scared of yet. I mean, you knew what the ultimate prize could be was in a body bag, but you didn't really know what that looked like or how it would feel. So it was hard to wrap my mind around, I'm here, especially going in Afghanistan, Bagram's so built up by now. And, you just didn't, there's no fighting in Bagram. You might get some rocket attacks here and there, but it still didn't feel real when I first landed. It didn't get real until they put us on the bird and they were taking us to where we were going. And I found out where we were going. And then we landed, in the mountains. That's where it kind of got real for me.
And do you feel it in yourself? I ask a lot of guys that I talk to on this show, on the inside, when you land, it doesn't feel, really that maybe realistic, but as you go into the mountains, do you feel yourself changing overall? Not only mind, but do you feel your body? Do you feel your senses kind of kicking up a little more, looking around, paying attention that you might not have done in the rear? Because I think that's where, when we talk about PTS, I think that's where a lot of that kicks in. That hypervigilance starts in your system. And I've talked to some guys on here that say it's hard to go from when you're constantly going in the red to drop it back into the green or the yellow. So do you feel that yourself as you were coming into the mountains?
Yeah. I want to say that the hypervigilant, or like being aware of everything, that kind of kicked in my first mission when we were left seat, right seat with the first infantry guys. They were leaving, and they were so nonchalant going on the first dismount of patrol. They just didn't really care. They were over. I think they had been there for like 15 months. So they were one of the last 15-month deployment guys, and so they were hurting. And they took us out on our first dismounted patrol in the Nagalam, because we were out of Fort Blessing, the Peshawar Valley, Korengal area. And I remember looking around, like staring at everything, every little bush, just everything freaked me out. But I looked over at these big red one guys, and they were just like smoking a cigarette, walking. They didn't give a shit at all. I get to see the difference between us two, and then it did form into that for myself as the deployment went on.
Where you got, I don't want to use the word lax at all, but you got more comfortable in the situation.
Comfortable. I don't want to say complacent, because that's the wrong word.
Right.
We were. It's not like those guys were suicidal and they like didn't care. They were just. They knew what to be afraid of. They knew what to look for. They knew the area so well, whereas I didn't. So, and as time progressed, I became that.
Now, you talk about 3 types of fighters in your book. The first one were the extreme. That was a very small number over there. You talk about the bullies, or the powerful ones that were kind of taking stuff for what they needed, and that was kind of a medium group. And then fighters hired by the Taliban. So when you're over there, and you seem to get along with who you were working with a lot from the book, the police officers that you were working with, the Afghan police, how do you start to look around and know, like we were talking about, knowing what to be afraid of? Good guy, bad guy, everyone looks the same, everyone is pretty much of the same culture or mind base. So how do you, as an American coming over there, figure out, like, okay, this is who I need to look out for, this is what I don't need to look out for, and become comfortable in that surrounding?
I think it's hard, and I think that's one thing that this generation of warfighters have had a hard time dealing with is that, you know, you look at every other war before that, you know, World War II, stuff like that. It's like you knew who the enemy was.
Right.
This is a new challenge of our generation of warriors that have to kind of put up with this, and it's hard. It's hard for us to make split decisions, and understanding who's good and who's bad, who has good intentions and who doesn't. Sometimes you train the Afghan police during the day, and they have dinner with their cousins who are Taliban at night, and it's really difficult for us. So yeah, it's hard to. I mean, sometimes you just knew. Sometimes you got those gut feelings, and you could just tell. But other times, yeah, it was hard, and that's why there were towards the end of my first and going to my second deployment, there were a lot of those green on blue actions, or, you know, a lot of Afghan police and army turning on the Americans. And so, yeah, it was really hard.
Yeah. And you mentioned that specifically in your book about training them during the day and then going to eat dinner with cousins and stuff like that. And so when you know things like that, how do you separate that out? How do you kind of compartmentalize all that stuff and still work and be part of that mission?
I mean, it's hard. You kind of just got to hope for the best. You have to hope that the guy that you're training isn't going to turn on you. You have to hope that, I mean, because you knew it was there and you knew it was going to happen at some point. But I tried to create relationships with these Afghan police and just bullshit with them and hang out with them and like give them an American name, talk about other things besides just the training, and create some type of comfort level for both of us that they actually will kind of hopefully care for me like I'm trying to care for them. And maybe that will help not cloud their judgment when they are being told by, say, the Taliban, hey, I need you to get more information on the Americans, or I need you to do this or that. And hopefully that'll help de-escalate those situations that, you know, there is no green on blue action.
Now, speaking about the police that you work with over there, of course, it's completely different than American policing or even military police, because there's a difference between the civilian-based policing and military police. When you get over there, is it just it just seems to me like a nightmare, just like it seemed from your book, so disorganized and so just like, hey, here's a gun and a badge, and here you do this. And is that how it was when you got over there, where they really needed us to step in because they didn't know any better?
Yeah, and they just, all they did was hang out at the police station. They weren't patrolling their city or their neighborhoods or villages, wherever you want to call it. They weren't out, you know, enforce any laws. They would just hang out inside with the police chief and bullshit and eat, and kind of just pull security from within that compound. But they wouldn't be out with the people, and they wouldn't be out engaging and talking to the people and trying to find information out and being proactive. And so that's where we had to come in those joint patrols, help, you know, engage with the local populace and teach them that they need to be at the forefront. They need to attack these things before it happens and stop being so reactive in every scenario, every day. Because or else if we didn't, they literally would just sit there and watch cars go by, you know. So, but we did see a progressive increase in training and just their effectiveness in time.
And I think that's what it all kind of goes back to, is they don't do any better because they don't know any better. Yeah. Once they're taught that, of course, you're going to have those one-offers and stuff like that don't follow that. But sooner or later, they're going to start to kind of understand, hey, this is what we really are doing this job for. Another job that you had over there that was interesting to me, they had sent you to EMT school and they made you a medic in the aid station. And it's not, you know, a medic at sick call on post. You're seeing real life shit every day. And you seem to talk about the aid station and being a medic with as much fondness as being a police officer. And on we'll get into it later on, but into your second deployment, that EMT stuff became kind of almost at the forefront in the final battle that you talk about in there. So can you talk about your feelings of being a medic and being there and seeing all that stuff and just how it affected you personally?
So yeah, I had, up to that point in my life, being 18 years old, I had no medical experience. I didn't even have an inkling of wanting to be a medic or, you know, a nurse, or the medical world just was not part of my life when I was 18 and younger. I just knew to put a Band-Aid on, and that was about it. And so, yeah, because of the way the Afghan war was fought and very non-contiguous, meaning there are, you have a platoon size element and then they split that platoon up and they scatter us throughout the mountainous area. And in doing so, because there's so much ground to cover in Afghanistan, there weren't enough medics to go around. And so prior to me deploying, they sent me to EMT school, prior to the surge. And that was good enough for them so that, when I got there, they said, "Hey, you're going to be a medic." And it kind of took me by surprise. I was like, no, I'm an MP. And they're like, "Yeah, we don't give a shit. Here's an aid bag. Go to the aid station, sign out the morphine, because it's considered a sensitive item." And I would have to work in the aid station pretty much every single day. When I wasn't engaged on mission, I had to be in the aid station. Every Thursday night, we had study halls. We were reading the latest medicine, updating ourselves on certain techniques and stuff like that. And then we actually went out on patrol. I was the medic for the squad, but I was also driving the truck. So I had to carry around that little piece that would combat lock the door from the outside.
Mm-hmm.
I would essentially, because my team leader would dismount, I would have to dismount as the medic, and I would combat lock the door. My gunner's in the truck all by himself, and then I would go on patrol. So it's just we were worked thin. It is what it is, but yeah, it was a hell of an experience, especially, like I said, I had 3 casualties I worked on my second deployment. That was because I was in more of a team leader role, and it just wasn't, the situations didn't present themselves. Mm-hmm. My first deployment, I had 113 casualties that I worked on. And it took me the first 20 to really get comfortable. And especially that first American, man, it was rough. So it definitely took a toll on my psyche, just because it's not something that I signed up for. I didn't walk into the recruiting station saying, this is what I want to do.
Right.
Now I'm completely glad that they put me in that position, that my leadership had confidence in me, and that I have those experience now. But yeah, at the time, it took me by surprise a lot.
Which do you think of, and I guess this is the right time for this question, which do you think, your role as a military police officer, your role as a medic, or your role as a sniper, or we can even talk about like your SRT days, but I think those are going to be far at the back. Which do you think promoted the most of the PTS that you go through?
Probably medic. Obviously, because it's a lot of engagement with the person who your patient. Sometimes you're the last thing they see when they die.
Right.
And sometimes you question a lot of your decision making. Was I fast enough? Did I do this right? It's a lot of it is on you. I've always been grateful to be an MP. I've always been a MP, 31 Bravo. I've never been anything else than that. But the experiences as a medic and as a designated squad marksman, or whatever you want to call it, have been amazing. But yeah, I think that medic stuff was the best and worst days of my life, just because, and then when you do good for not just American casualties, but Afghan casualties, kids,
right,
it makes you feel good about yourself that you're actually doing something, in a country, in a war like Afghanistan, where it's the wild, wild west. It's been fighting for over 20 years now, at least with us. There's so many strategic decisions. Yeah, way before that. And there's so many strategic decisions that go into this whole war, things that I can't control. The one thing I can control is whether this person lives or dies. And I feel like that's my piece of the puzzle that I could help in this fucking crazy ass war is this one thing I could affect this. So I feel like I was actually doing something in the war, and not just driving around waiting to get blown up and shot. So it was something that I took very personal.
And so when you look at your other positions, going out in the field with your designated marksman, I think those things kind of distance you from the battlefield. They're not so, like you said, with being a medic, that one-on-one staring right into the face of it. And I think that can mask it a little bit, because you seem to, in the book, enjoy that job. Whenever you got to go out and do that job, you really enjoyed it, especially when I think during the presidential elections, you would set up with your troops overlooking the police station and watch that and kind of rotate your guys in and out. And you seem to, of all the things that you talk about in the book, you seem to enjoy that a lot. And I mean enjoy it as in the sense of there wasn't kind of that tight-chestedness when you talk about the sniper that when you talk about everything else. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, yeah, and I think, like I said, it's just that personal connection with the people,
Right.
and this is my purpose. This is my job. I need to keep them safe, and yeah, I think that it'll always have a special place in my heart.
Well, so let's talk about the first time bullets start flying around you. We've talked about as you get into Afghanistan, you don't kind of understand the full effect of everything. Then you come to the mountains, you start feeling it a little more. First time bullets start flying. Head and heart, what are we thinking?
Well, so I talk about it in the book. The first couple months, there was maybe some explosions, some rocket attacks. Nothing was really directed at us
Right.
as the units were switching out. It was the presidential elections when we were sitting on the mountain. That was my first. That's where I earned my cab. That was my first contact with the enemy, and yeah, I don't think it was until after I got off that mountain that I started to process. 3 day. It was a 3 day thing. So on day 4 is when I started to really process everything, as far as the seriousness of holy shit, like we all almost died. And when you read that part in the book where the Apaches came in and they
Did their gun runs.
Yeah, that kind of took me like, holy shit, like, what was I thinking? Like, I should have waited. I gave our position away. I was starting to question myself for the first time, as a private, like, man, I could have jeopardized us, but, I was trying to go get these guys who I thought were dead. And so because that was my job. So, yeah, it brought a lot of, for the first time, it brought a lot of like decision making and critical thinking in my own mind. Do my own little internal AAR of like, damn, was I making the right decisions? And then it made me be on my toes a little bit more going forward. So,
And it seems like whenever that happens, you're a very confident guy from the book and from talking to you. You're a confident guy. So the first time that happens where you start really questioning yourself and saying, what did I do wrong? That's got to be a weird feeling. And for that to happen, because even when you talk about your youth and playing football, you seem like you knew what you were doing. You didn't really question yourself. You knew when everything was going on. When you start to question yourself, one, it's got to be a weird thing to start questioning yourself at that age. And then two, to question yourself where it's life or death. It's not, hey, we're going to lose the football game. Someone's going to die with the wrong decisions made. How does that affect you personally? And how do you get past that in that kind of situation? Because that's a situation where you need to get up, reload, and go, or someone's going to get hurt. So how does that happen with a young guy like yourself over there?
I don't know. That's a good question. I'm not really sure. I had really good NCOs, my entire platoon, just because I started out with one squad and I got moved over to be a medic to another squad. So I really got to know the entire platoon, all the NCOs, and the build up to the deployment and while we were there. And so I just never wanted to disappoint them. And they were really hard on us during training prior to the deployment. And they were really hard on us to keep us on our toes during the deployment and not get complacent. And we just respected all of our leaders so much. Like, damn, we had some of the best NCOs. Just the way the platoon was put together was one of a kind. Yeah, I don't know. I think questioning myself was because I did not want to let those guys down because of my role, as an MP, but also a medic. I tried to take it as serious as I could. And then when I did mess up, I really took myself down a notch. Like, man, you fucking idiot. Like, you're going to piss these guys off. Like, these are battle tested, veterans who've got multiple deployments.
Right.
And this is my first one. And I just didn't want to piss them off. So everything I did was for my leaders. I just wanted to impress them, and I wanted to earn their respect, essentially. So.
And so when you do that, and you're constantly trying to impress, but you're also knowing this is how I want to lead when I become older. Because you mentioned that numerous times in the book.
Yeah.
You mentioned during the big battle that you're talking about where 200 meters turns into 2,000 meters and you're running up this side of this hill, you're trying to get these people, you look around and you don't see any of your NCOs. I want to say phased. They're just planning the next part. They're moving, and you even have one. Sergeant First Class Egan's first thought was to give you water, make sure you're okay, make sure that you're ready to go on the mission. How does he have that kind of mental fortitude is the question that you ask yourself. So to that, did you ever figure out how he had that mental fortitude, and did you get it yourself for the second part?
No, I don't know. I don't know how they did it. I don't know what experiences they had prior to that first big battle, maybe on their previous deployments to Iraq or Afghanistan or whatever. And I was the only private on that mountain or part of that rescue team that went up. The rest of them were all E5 and above, from E5 to first sergeant. The 9 of us that went up, I was the only soldier. So all I was looking at was the epitome of a leader, everything that they were doing. And so every person I looked at, whereas I was having self-doubt in those situations, they were like, problem? All right, too easy. Here's the solution. Move on to the next one. And then it's like, I'm constantly thinking like, dude, there's no way we're making it down this mountain without paying a bigger price. Like, this is stupid. What are we doing? Blah, blah. And they were just like, whatever. Hey, let's go. And like, they're just problem solvers. I don't know. And so I try to keep that day at the forefront of my mind every time I have to make a leadership decision. And I always think of the human dimension. I think of the soldiers are always at the end of my decisions, and I try to make the best decision possible. And so a lot of my leadership foundation was based off of that day and everything that I kind of witnessed, especially leading into that second big battle.
So let's talk about that second big battle. I want to kind of take a back seat to this. I just want you to walk through it. I've seen a couple of videos of you where you just, of course, we don't have the slides and everything where you're talking to like some West Point guys, but can you just walk us through that battle? I'm not going to ask a lot of questions, but just kind of from beginning to end. And if there's something that I want to like focus on, I'll jump in on you.
Yeah. So essentially we were, there was a squad of us MPs, 16 of us, 4 gun trucks. We were attached to 25th ID, and they wanted to go back into the Pesh River Valley that the 101st Airborne had pulled out the year prior. And so I was in this valley on my whole first deployment. And so I knew the area very well. And I was the only one in the company had been in this area. So we were the ones that got chosen to go be part of this operation, Operation Diamond Head. And essentially infantry air assaulted in on one hilltop. I think the Rangers or somebody else air assaulted. I'm sure SF was there. They were all doing their own, infantry things, right? They were taking the fight to the enemy up in the mountains. But because of the CARS I-12 rules, we had to do everything jointly with the Afghan police. And so the plan was we were going to go into the valley, link up with the Afghan police, and then proceed forward into the valley with them. And then when we got to the first checkpoint, they were all dead. The checkpoint was on fire, and all of their heads were beheaded, and they were on sticks. And there was a message written on the wall of the police checkpoint that said, "Keep coming." And essentially they knew about the operation. It was the Taliban. They were taunting us to keep coming deeper into the valley, that they were waiting for us essentially. And so what was supposed to have been like a 2-week operation turned into like a month or 2-month operation. And for us, the first week, pop shots here and there, nothing too crazy though. And then on the morning of August 4th is when we got a call that a Afghan humanitarian aid convoy was coming from where Fob Blessing was back to resupply, and they got attacked, and their own Afghan police left their people in the kill zone. And so there was a fuel truck that was shot up and was left stranded with a wounded Afghan police officer shot, and he's still in the kill zone by himself. Everyone else just left him. So we happened to be the closest element, and they told us to go respond to it because we were a couple hundred meters away. And I was in the 3rd gun truck, team leader. I had my soldier, my driver, Garcia, my gunner, Doyle, and my assistant gunner, Melton. And when we pulled up, nothing was really being fired at us. And, I asked him what was going on. My squad leader said there was this police officer that was shot. And because I was still in that role as a medic, we didn't have a platoon medic. And so I told him, I said, well, I'll go out and grab him. And the one thing I didn't want, because I couldn't see anything around the mountain bend, I didn't want to walk myself into an ambush. I didn't want to put myself in a situation I couldn't get myself out. I really didn't know where the enemy was at. I didn't know what I was walking into. I didn't know what it looked like. So I was kind of going in blind. And so I told my assistant gunner, Melton, who was the most senior guy, said, like, you're in charge of the truck. If I don't come back, like, take care of these guys. And so I crawled to the back of the truck, and I ran out towards the first truck. And just to paint you a picture, what I witnessed was the fuel truck was 40 feet in front of me. To the right into the ditch was the police officer shot. And then going up to the right was the village of Mateen. And to my left, right outside the driver's side, was, because the roads are only as wide as our vehicles, was a huge cornfield for about 200 meters, and the mountain kind of inclined around us. And so it sounded like the fire was coming from like 150, 200 meters maybe, which was normal. And so I ran towards the fuel truck. I baseball slid into the ditch, and I saw he was shot in the lower left leg. So I started working on him, tourniquet, stuff like that. And he was freaking out, like more than like normal. I've worked on a lot of people, and I don't know if he was just scared or he knew something I didn't know. I don't know. And then we started noticing that, like, because he was taking his nails and he was digging with his bare hands for more defilade. He was just trying to get closer to the ground, and they were trying to shoot into the ditch at this point. And so I got the situation. I said I didn't want to get myself in. I got myself in. I was now stuck in this ditch. I couldn't lift my head. The rounds are coming into the ditch. And so he's grabbing onto my radio, my vest. He's freaking out, and he's switching my channels. Now I can't call for help. I'm trying to not lift my head up and stuff like that and look at all this. And thankfully, truck one pulled up parallel right behind me, and Sergeant Kaz, my squad leader, got out. And he pulled out 2 frag grenades, gave me like a look like get ready to run kind of thing. And he pulled the pins and just kind of lobbed him on the other side of the truck, like not really how you're supposed to really throw a traditional grenade, which I didn't really – I questioned it, but I was like, well, whatever. I didn't really think about it. And I grabbed my casualty, and as I'm getting out of the ditch, there's a F-16 comes in for like a super close show of force. Like I can see the pilot's red helmet. He came so close to the ground.
Well, I want to stop you right there real quick. Okay. Because you mentioned one of the big points in the book was Staff Sergeant Kaz when he gets out. Mm-hmm. And you speak so highly of this guy in the book, and like he just seems like almost like a superhero how you describe him in there. So let's talk about him for a minute, because I want to give this guy some respect, because he really fucking handled up on some people that day. Yes, and you can tell in the book, like you just have this way of talking about him, like I said, that makes him seem like a superhero. So can we talk about him for just a minute?
Yeah. So right before this operation happened, like maybe 2 or 3 weeks before this operation even took place, he wasn't even our squad leader. He came from Alaska. He PCS'd to Fort Carson, which is where we were out of. And I guess as soon as he got to Carson, he found out we were deployed, and he hopped on the deployment. He loved deployment. It's like, I think it was his 3rd deployment at that time. And so he was a late deployer. He got to us. We had an E5 squad leader, Sergeant Hazlett, who we loved, but because he was outranked by Sergeant Kaz, who was a staff sergeant, bumped him down. And so we at first kind of despised him. We were like, man, who the fuck does this guy think he is coming in? You know, Hazlett was so good. He was a really good NCO. He cared about us deeply. And so we kind of like despised Kaz initially, and we didn't know anything about him. And so, you know, for the first week, he was just getting to know the area. 2nd week, we get deployed to go up to the mountains. 3rd week, we found ourselves in operation. We don't even know this guy, but it was like as soon as the round started flying, he was in his element. And I witnessed it for the first time. I could just see how calm he was, and he was making sound decisions. He didn't seem scared or phased. And it was like he had been our leader for 20 years. And even though he probably didn't even know our full names at this point, really, or where we're from and all that kind of background. It's like he took care of us, like, you know what I'm saying? Like I said, he was our leader for like 20 years. So it was very weird. We looked at him very differently after this firefight, and he earned our respect immediately as soon as this thing was over. But yeah, and then he turned out to be one of the greatest leaders and mentors of mine.
Okay, so let's I didn't mean to get off track, but I just remember from reading the book, like when you get to that part of him stepping out of the vehicle, it's like an aura comes over him.
It was like fucking God. Yeah.
and so I wanted to kind of pay a little time to him just because of how you mentioned it. So the F-16 comes in really low flyby, just kind of a show of force because it doesn't really do a gun run or anything.
No.
You see the red helmet of the pilot. You're thinking probably, okay, we're back up now. We got him that just took that out. We got low flybys. We're going to get out of this. But it turns out that it gets a little more complicated.
Yeah. So I called a truck one. I said, drop your ramp. They dropped the ramp at the back of the truck. I'm getting my casualty in. I set him in. I look left into the cornfield, and one of the last things I see is a bunch of the corn stalks moving really heavily. And I remember thinking to myself, like, Jesus Christ, like they're going to try to overrun us, like, because they were running towards us at this point. And so I closed the ramp. and I wanted to sustain my casualty, check his tourniquet, make sure it didn't come loose, package Israeli dressing a little bit more, stuff like that. And so while I'm doing this, I look at Jelinus, the gunner, and I say, hey, man, watch this guy. Make sure he doesn't touch his tourniquet. Because from my experience, a lot of the times they didn't really understand the tourniquet, the Afghans, and they would loosen it and they would bleed out. So he was like, Roger, I try to, but my gun keeps jamming. And I was like, well, keep working it, man. And so I'm getting ready to reload my weapon and check everything, make sure I'm good to go. And it's like the whole truck got quiet, and they were all looking up in the hatch that was open to the top of the truck where the gun was. And I didn't know what they were looking at. And I peeked my head over, and it was my buddy, Sergeant Lane. And Lane was with me my first deployment. He was an OIF-1 vet. I mean, this is like, I think his 4th deployment. He was combat proven, way more than I was. And so he was like a 6'2", 3 dude, 200 and something pounds. He's a monster, without gear. And, our trucks already stand 12 feet tall. And now he was kneeling on top of the truck, and he was trying to fix whatever was going on with the weapon, which was the trigger assembly, essentially. And so the gas solenoid wasn't pulling on the weapon. And so he was messing with it. So I figured, well, I'd get up there and help him and cover at least his backside, because we were now getting shot from two sides, the cornfield area and now the village. So the gun was facing towards the cornfield. I peek up into the village, and I'm starting to engage up into there. And we're sitting up there for a few minutes, and Lane got tired of trying to fix the solenoid. So he told the gunner, use the camera inside the truck, move the gun around, let me know when you're on target. So the gunner is inside the truck and is essentially moving the joystick and the gun around, finding targets, and he yells, good. And then Lane is manually pulling the trigger on the enemy fighters. And he's just spinning around this damn truck for I don't know how long, a couple minutes maybe, and a round skims his ass cheek. And I was like, dude, you're done. This fucking gun's done. Like, I had to make a medical call at that point, because as a medic, I have to make sure that everyone's obviously in positions that it's not going to jeopardize their lives and others. So I said, dude, get the fuck off the truck. You're done.
Right.
And so as he's getting off the truck, that's when we see Sergeant Kaz, and he's running from truck 1 by himself to the fuel truck. And, it's our squad leader. We don't know this motherfucker like that yet, but that's the squad leader. We can't let him go by himself. And so we jump off the truck, and we get up to the field truck, and Lane pulls Kaz out of the field truck and says, the squad leader, we got to keep you safe. Drops the keys on the floorboard, and as Lane goes over to pick them up, 5 rounds come right through the windshield where Lane's head would have been. So he turns his field truck on, puts it in reverse, slams it into the ditch so that Taliban can't capture its fuel resources. We turn the knob on, dump the fuel into the ditch so they couldn't take it. And
That's
then we got told
to have a pool of flammable liquid
fuel
surrounding you on yet another side.
Right. and so it turned into the AO commander, whatever we were talking to, said, hey, we got another infantry unit coming. They're going to replace you in about 15 minutes or so. We're getting spun up. Stay there, sustain the casualty, defend your position at all costs. So we had to move the trucks up a little bit because truck 1 was down, like I said. So me, Lane, and Kaz decided we were going to cover the flanks and the blind spots of all the vehicles, because they were trying to bum rush the vehicles to the point that the guns couldn't come low enough. And so we used truck 1 as cover. Lane and Kaz are shooting up into the village and in the cornfield, and I'm shooting in the cornfield from the backside in between truck 1 and 2. And I'm shooting M4. I'm shooting, we grab the boom boxes. We're throwing frag grenades. We're shooting 320 or 203s out the weapon. And so I shoot about 25 203s, and on the 26 203, the knob on the front of my 203, the little knob that's up there sucks. It just comes loose, and I didn't have time to fix it. So now my 203's in one hand, my M4's in the other. It's completely, I can't use it at all. So I throw it in the truck, and that was probably one of the best things that happened to me that day. And so I asked the driver to give me his 249. He had a 100 round drum on it, and so I grab it, rack it.
So people that are listening, they might not know what that is. So let's talk about that being a squad weapon. So
yeah, so it's a squad automatic weapon. Essentially, it shoots a lot of rounds really fast. And that was, like I said, probably one of the best things that happened to me was I grabbed that weapon. And like I said, it had a 100 round drum, a little nut sack on the bottom of it. And so I go to the back of the truck one, and I'm just making sure that the situation's good, because at this point we're being told that like the enemy's maneuvering around the front and back side of our vehicles as well. So we're checking the blind spots of like the ditch area, making sure, because they tried getting into the ditch at one point as well. And so Lane and Kaz are at the front of truck one, and they're watching pretty much from the cornfield, front of the road, into the ditch and into Mateen. And so they have a wide area to look at. So I'm taking from the back side of the truck, from the village of Mateen into the cornfield. And so I circle around the back of truck one, and I'm taking a knee, and I'm putting my rounds onto my feed tray, and I'm getting ready to lock and load my weapon. And I look into the windshield of truck two, and my friend Sergeant Bino, he's waving his hands hysterically, and he's pointing into the cornfield. And in my mind at the time, I was like, yeah, guy, like, I know they're there. Like, what are you talking about? Yeah, we've been shooting at that. So I didn't know what he was trying to say.
Right.
And because my radio was all messed up when the guy was grabbing it and stuff. And so I circle around the back of truck one, and that was when I had the scariest moment of my life. I get about midway around the back of truck one, about halfway behind the truck, and I have 3 Taliban fighters come out the cornfield, and they're 6 to 8 feet away from me. Like, I could spit in these motherfuckers. They're so close. And we were all 4 of us were kind of scared to see one another. 2 of them were kind of like on the road. One was coming up from the cornfield onto the road. And they had all their weapons were kind of not lowered, but they were lower
At the ready.
than pointed at me. Yeah.
Kind of low ready.
And so they're at the low ready. And I grabbed the 249. I looked right at the right enemy fighter, and I just let it rip. And I cut the enemy fighters in half. The recoil lifted it up to the left. I don't even know how long I held that damn trigger down. I just let it rip.
That almost seems like a Quentin Tarantino movie. I mean, the way you describe it, where you come out and everyone's just face to face.
Yeah, and I just never, I had seen the Taliban close. I'd worked on them. I'd worked on enemy fighters as a medic. I just never in a million years would have thought, in this type of war, in this type of environment, that I would have ever seen them that close in a confrontation like that,
Right.
in a gunfight. And so I immediately swung back around to the backside of the truck to catch my breath, to fucking kind of decompress for like a quick 2 seconds. And that's when I yelled at Kaz and Lane. I was like, dude, they're about to overrun us. And I'm thinking that more groups are going to come in right after them. So I'm shooting in the cornfield a little bit more, and I need to reload, and the weapons are all going dry. I needed lube. So lube was all the way back in my truck, in truck 3. So I ran all the way back to my truck. I get into the back, and I'm lubing up my gun, and I'm checking on my soldiers. And that's when like they had gotten really quiet. And this is the first time I'm seeing my soldiers since this whole thing really popped off.
Right.
And Doyle was my gunner, and he was like a hot shot. I think he walked away in the deployment like 60-something kills. Like he was so good. But they all looked at me like they wanted to, like, especially Doyle and Garcia, they looked at me like they wanted to break some like bad news to me. And Garcia, who was in charge of comms, said that the F-16 radioed in. Obviously they could see where we're at. And they said that, hey, the air support says we're completely surrounded. And I was like, yeah, man, I'm tracking. Like, I know. And then they said, my soldiers don't know that I just experienced that moment that close to the fighters. And they said that they think that there's an enemy force of 150 plus enemy fighters. And, I was like, yeah, it sure feels like it, bro. Like, and Garcia was like, sorry, there's only 16 of us. Like, what the fuck? What are we doing here? And that's the moment in the book. And that was the moment in real life where I kind of like had to stop and think. I thought about the events on September of 2009, where I was on that mountain, and I was that scared private, and I had that doubt that we weren't getting off that mountain, and I knew that they were feeling the same things I was feeling back then, but I had to kind of try to embrace what my leaders did for me in 2009 and give that confidence to my soldiers, so they understood that I needed them to revert to their primal stages in order to overcome the enemy that day. And I needed them to be as equally as brutal and harsh as combat is to overcome them. And so I kind of gave them a little pep talk. I told them I just needed them to do their job essentially, and that I needed to go back out there. And so that sucked. That sucked as a leader, because I probably should have stayed with them. As my soldiers, I shouldn't leave them. But I knew they needed me at the front of the truck. I knew the situation. I had the 249. they needed me more up there, but it really sucked leaving my soldiers. And so when I got back to truck 1, that's when they were going to start turning around so we could leave. And so I figured, well, I'll get up in the fight then. So that truck 1's gun was still down. So I got up in the emergency hatch, and I have from my waist up is completely exposed. And that's when I'm shooting in the village, and I happen to see a guy come around this house, and I was just getting my weapon out of the turret and up to me, and he had already gotten 2-3 shots off on me. Hit the top of the truck, and then I was able to barely acquire the target, put 2 into his torso, and before he dropped and hit the ground, I don't know if something hit the top of the truck or something exploded. I'm not really sure, but something hit my face about an inch lower than my left eye, snapped my head back. I fell into the turret. I landed in my buddy's Lane's lap, and then that's when he pulled like this long piece of shrapnel. He just pulled it out of my face.
Well, didn't he tell you were like, I think I'm shot, man, and he was like, no, it's just shrapnel. Shut the fuck up.
Yeah, I said, Lane, I'm hit, man, I'm hit, because it's hard to. As soon as I got into his lap and I was not moving for a second, because he caught me and he was like, what the fuck are you doing? And I started to feel like blood, and I started to feel like just hot, just burning, and I was like, Lane, I think I'm hit, man. I didn't want to touch it because I couldn't see it, and Lane being Lane just pulled it out of my face, looked at it, threw it on the ground, told me to stop being a pussy.
Yeah.
Okay. and before I could get out of his lap and get back up in the turret, that's when we looked out the front windshield, and that's where we saw fucking Kaz's defining moment. And he's running from the front of the truck to go to the back and link up with the infantry guys, and he's shooting in the cornfield, and he goes completely black on ammo, and he shoots his last round, and as he does, an enemy fighter presents himself out of the cornfield, and he's raising his weapon up at Kaz. Kaz slings M4, draws M9 pistol, and shoots him twice in the torso and just kept running. And I was just like, I looked at Lane, I was like, bro, did we just witness someone get killed with a fucking pistol? Like, yeah. And he's like, yeah, man. Like, so we call Kaz Pistol Pete. That's his forever nickname or whatever. But yeah, so we exfilled the area. We got the casualty to the aid station. Myself and Lane got looked at, and I think they said the BDA report was like 50 to 60 enemy fighters were killed or wounded of the 150. So it was a pretty successful. Obviously, air support had a lot to do with that, because I also forgot on our exfil they were doing like danger close strafing runs, like 25 meters off the trucks. So they were taking a lot of the kills too, but it was a successful mission essentially. So
well, if you figure 16 of you, 160 of them from the air support, you kind of see that it's almost like a 10-to-1 ratio.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
sure felt like it.
Yeah, that's a lot of people. So lessons that you learned that day, what's a defining lesson that you walked away from that day going, I got to put this into my life for the rest of it?
That's a good question. I mean, Army wise, training does everything. I mean, my soldiers, myself, everything just fell into place. Training worked. We just did what we knew was right, and we ran through the steps, and people were not doing too much. They were doing what they thought was best, and people were trying to get air support, and they were doing just the small things on the radio and the lubrication and the weapons and things that they can control. They stayed in their sectors of fire and only concerned themselves with the things that they could affect. And as a team, we just got it. We just fucking got it done. And so Army wise, yeah, that's something I'll always take with me, is how effective we were being completely outnumbered. And then personal wise, man, I don't know. It's a good question. I never really thought about it. I think same rule applies. Just the sacrifice that we had for one another. I put myself in a position that I shouldn't have, but I thought was best as far as going out to that casualty, and Lane and Kaz, put themselves in positions that could have taken their life to save mine, and that Afghan. So just the sacrifice of it all is something I try to, if they're willing to sacrifice their lives for me, or put their lives on line for me, then as even just daily interaction with other humans, I have to try to do my best to just be a better fucking human with whoever I come in contact with, and be grateful that I had men who were greater than me try to put themselves before me, and I try to live by that on my daily life now, years later. So I think that's probably one.
I'm glad you mentioned that one, because you talk about that in another section of the book where, and I'm probably going to butcher this name, but the Marawara police station, I don't know how to, is that right? Marawara? Okay.
Yeah, you got it right.
So you're talking about the police station, and you go up on the roof, and I guess from what I'm getting from the book is you've got an Afghan with you that doesn't understand what you're talking about. You're shooting from a rooftop. You're trying to explain to him. And then you tell him go down. And as soon as you tell him go get people, as soon as you tell him that, you roll over in your head and you go, he's going to fuck this up. I know it.
Yeah.
He goes down and he says, American down. And you said you look down and you see all these guys that are pinned down that at the flick of a switch don't give a shit anymore that they're pinned down. They all start to move to come to your position to help you out. Yeah. And you said that kind of changed your outlook just on, it made you even more proud, one, to be a soldier, and then to know these kind of people.
Yeah, exactly. It's a good defining moment. We actually have that on camera because Kaz was wearing his helmet cam that day, and he was part of the pin down group. And in the very last seconds of the videos, when you see the police officer come over, and he said, American down. And these dudes have been pinned down for minutes, couldn't get up, pick their heads up. They didn't give a fuck. They all got up and ran to where I was at because I was cut off. But yeah. And then when I saw them all come to my position, I was like, damn, man, that's a damn good feeling.
Yeah. Also that you knew that guy was going to fuck that up. I thought that was, it's kind of a telling moment in the book, but it's also funny where, I mean, you say it and then not a minute later that happens. So because with him doing that, I mean, he really put a lot of other soldiers' lives at risk because of that. If he could have delivered, and I get it. By no means am I saying there's not a communication barrier or anything like that there, but it put a lot more people at risk. So, and
that's the best part of it though, is I don't think even if they got the correct message and found out that I was just pinned down by myself, I think they would have equally have gotten up and done the same thing. And that's just tells a lot about them as soldiers and as people.
And that's the whole thing, is there's a different kind of, and I think you've been in the military long enough and you've been in garrison and in combat units. There, you would say that in everyone that I've ever talked to about it, there's a difference in the type of bonds that are formed. You can be close to someone that you just work with, but for someone to say they'll lay down their life for you, you'll lay down their life for them, there's a different kind of bond. And I think that might be part of what's hard for you now, is because there's not those kind of bonds. Everyone is kind of now looking to make rank. They're looking for their next opportunity in the military. And it's a completely different army that you're in now than your prior experiences.
Yeah, the army has changed. The people have changed as well.
Now, let me ask you a question. We've had a couple people on here that I've talked to. Of course, I went to Fort Leonard Wood a long time ago whenever I went to school there. But is there stress cards now? Is that a real thing?
From what I heard, yeah. I don't deal with the privates. I stay the fuck away from the drill sergeant life and all that stuff. But yeah, from what I'm hearing, they're stress cards. They don't call them, they call them warrior companions instead of battle buddies now. And I think they're changing the name to they're no longer going to use the word DFAC, and it's the Army Restaurant. Swear to God. Yeah. It's not going to be called basic training anymore. I think it's going to be called the Army Camp or something like that.
Oh, nice. Just listen, just because you pour syrup on shit, don't make it pancakes, okay? So, the food in the DFAC sucks. So, the only food I ever liked in the DFAC was breakfast. That was it.
Yeah.
Lunch and dinner are shitty. I think we can all agree on that. There's a couple more things that I want to talk about in the book. You use the word wake up a lot. Now, does that come from when that sergeant told you kind of wake up in that first big battle? Is that where it kind of derives from, or did you have that before? Because you tell yourself in the book a lot, wake up, get back on target. And
Yeah, no, that was something I implemented after I decided I wanted to write the book, and I kind of added that to the story. But
Okay.
because I found myself kind of trying to tell myself to wake up, that's the first words of the book. And when my soldier Melton wakes me up, and then it's kind of like an Easter egg throughout the book during key moments that
Right.
I'm just constantly trying to tell myself to wake up. And at the very end, the last page of the book, it kind of explains that, all these years later, I've been trying to tell myself to wake up and, just snap out of it kind of thing. But I can't, because I've realized that years ago, initially during that first big battle in September of 2009, that we all kind of died that day, mentally. We're all kind of still roaming that valley, roaming that mountain. Physically, I may still be here in 2020, but mentally, I feel like I've died all that time ago. So there's a gap separation, and it's taken me this long to kind of realize that.
Well, and that's a big thing that you do talk about at the end of the book, is that, even though a lot of people didn't die over there, their kind of soul is still roaming that area. Like a piece of them has been left there.
Yep.
For till the end of time. Let's also talk about Lieutenant Parton. You mentioned him a lot in the book. His and we don't want to get into that because I don't want to give away the whole book. I want people to read that kind of stuff in the book. But you were face to face with this guy. You knew him before that, his guitar playing. Can you just describe kind of your relationship with him and why it's so important that to this day you still do the fundraising for him?
Yeah, so he wasn't my organic lieutenant. I had a really good lieutenant, Lieutenant Nicholson, who was our organic MP LT. But when our squad got detached from our platoon and got sent up north by ourselves, when I was in that role as a medic, we got attached to 361 Cav Hatch platoon, and it was his platoon. So they took us in like we were just another squad, one of their own. They took care of us. We shared the same CP as them. And they did their missions, we did ours, but administratively they took care of us and always make sure we had everything. So I'd always be in the CP with him, because I used to work the Tiger system. I had to plug all the information in for my squad leader, and so I'd be in the CP. He'd always be playing his guitar, and he was just a nice and friendly guy. He was a West Point graduate, super smart. Everyone just loved him. He's a really nice guy. So it was key for me that he was the center of the book. His foundation was as well. So some of my proceeds that I get go to his foundation. And it's just a centerpiece of the book because, the second battle was cool. We killed a lot of people. It was a badass American moment. It's a good way to close the book. But chapter 5 seems to be everyone's very emotional chapter because obviously there's an American that is killed and all the emotion that kind of comes with it. But I figured if I don't talk about him, then he dies twice. And so it's my due diligence to talk about him, because how many other Lieutenant Partons are out there? How many veterans have stories of people who they served with who were killed in these crazy battles or firefights? And because these veterans don't want to talk about it, those names never get told again. So as long as I live, I will always talk about Lieutenant Parton and who he was. And so I could try to keep him and his foundation alive as much as possible. That's my job. That's
and that's what we try and do on this show a lot is get out those stories. People may have heard them, but they don't know the insides of what's going on. And what we want to do is really humanize people. And I think that you've done a fantastic job in this book of humanizing people that other people don't know. That's just a name to people. But when you really put flesh and blood and character to these guys, it really makes it personal to people, of someone maybe they didn't know him but they knew someone else like him. And so I can't tell you enough. Fantastic book that you did, and I really enjoy that you talk about your feelings. So in wrapping this up, let's talk about a couple of the things that you're doing, what you want to promote, and then we'll move on and talk about just where you go from here. So what are some of the things that you want to put out there? Because I know there's a lot of different things that you're doing right now, not just the book.
Yeah. So, the book is just a foundation. It's just a platform. But like social media wise, I've been using like my Instagram a lot to partner up with a lot of veteran owned businesses. And I just want to help them get their names out there. We do a lot of giveaways. I try to showcase their artwork, whatever that may be, whether it's woodworking or painting or whatever. And they can give these items away. Like we'll do like one giveaway, and it gets them some followers. It gets them some customers, because I know how hard it is. Well, I don't know how hard it is, but I know I have a lot of friends that have transitioned out of the military, and it's very hard for them to go from one job to another. And especially if they're a business owner, and they spent X amount of years in the military, they don't have that background. They're just kind of jumping right into it. So it's our job to support one another in our veteran community. So like I said, I try to showcase these guys and their businesses so that they can earn money, right? Because they're not six-figure, like multi-billion-dollar corporations. And I mean, those people have their fucking money, man. Like the veterans deserve that shit. They deserve happiness. And I want to do anything I can to get them that happiness. Whether that's just a small post to recognize who they are and what they've done. And I try to just highlight veterans in general. And I also use my social media as a platform to reach out to others if they need someone to talk to. Like I'm very transparent as far as I read every single message I get. And I give out my email. I give my personal cell phone if someone needs someone to talk to. That's what I would want. And if I was in dire need, and so I just try to be an outlet for veterans. Simple as that.
Well, you do a lot of great things on there, and we had talked the other night. I want to hook you up with the guys from 22 Kill, because I think they have a really important mission about stopping veteran suicide, because it's kind of out of control right now, especially with all these lockdowns and everything. A lot of people are, like you said, that PTS is really starting to talk to them a lot. So we need to do everything we can. They defended us. They gave us these freedoms. We need to do everything we can to make sure that they're taken care of on the backside of it. So guys, this has been a great talk. The book is Ghosts of the Valley. I'm going to put links up to it where you can get it everywhere. Go ahead and give out your Facebook and your Instagram so people can find you on there.
Yeah, so the Ghost of the Valley has its own Facebook and Instagram. And then for my personal, Sean Tobias Ambriz is my Facebook. And then my Instagram is Chief_Pink Mist. You could get the book on Amazon, Nook, and Kindle. And then I'm just waiting for my publisher. He's kind of dragging his feet. I keep harping to him, but we're going to release an audio book here soon. And so you read the book.
Yes.
And you know how like there's a bunch of internal dialogue and italicized stuff. So I went and I recorded all that. And then he hired a professional reader who's going to read the entire book. But when those italicized parts come up, you'll actually hear my voice in the audio books. So it's like my own internal thoughts. So it's kind of double narrate. It's different. Trying something
be pretty
new.
Cool. Well, and another cool thing, since you brought that up about the book, is your list of resources at the end of it. I mean, there's pages and pages of resources for people to whatever kind of help they may need. And that's another thing that makes this book so great. So guys, make sure you pick it up. It's in softback. You can get it on Amazon. You can get it on Nook, on Kindle. An audio book is coming out. So it's called Ghosts of the Valley. You guys definitely need to check this out and hear these stories. We only talked about a small portion of what happened over there. And what's great about this book, it's a very fast read, I think, and it covers just important things. It doesn't get into the minutia of everything that's going on over there. It gets to the important parts that made you the soldier that you are today. And I think it can really help other people that are dealing with this PTS and thinking about things that went on over there or in the Middle East or wherever they may have been. So guys, that's going to be it for the show this week. I'll put all the links up to get the book. It's been Sean Tobias Ambriz. He is now at Fort Leonard Wood. So if you're in that area, which I hope no one ever is in that area of Fort Leonard Wood, you can stop by and say hi. But if not, hit him up on Facebook, on Instagram. Yeah. If you want more of us, you can find us at Twitter at DoublespeakDJ, at Facebook at the DTD Podcast, and on YouTube at the DTD Podcast. That's going to be it for the show this week. That's Sean. I'm DJ. This has been the show. We'll catch you on the next one. See you guys.